Turning to politics, so much going on. Former LA Mayor Eric Garcetti finally gets his ambassadorship to India. Another bombshell recording in the Georgia investigation into Donald Trump, and a Russian fighter jet collides with a U.S. drone over international waters. Here to break it all down is Caroline Heldman, as she does every Thursday, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Okay, let's start local with Eric Garcetti. Finally, after 2 years, he is confirmed now to become the ambassador to India, with several Republicans voting in favor of his confirmation. How was this able to happen with bipartisan support?
Well, I think it all comes back to Biden and the White House doing a lot of last-minute lobbying. What is unusual about this vote, and as you know, it was up in the air last week, but what's so unusual is the 7 Republicans who got behind him, while 3 Democrats voted no. But it was the Republicans that gave him the advantage. And, you know, Garcetti, 26 months on hold with some pretty credible evidence that he knew about the multiple whistleblower complaints in his office. But I think at the end of the day, there was a lot of pressure to put someone in this post because of the national security imperative involved.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We haven't had a U.S. ambassador to India in 2 years. Obviously, our relationship with this nuclear power is critical, especially when India is one of the few allies still refusing to condemn Russia in the Ukraine war. What do you see as Garcetti's biggest challenges going in?
Well, I think it's exactly that. The fact that Prime Minister Modi met with Putin and said that their friendship was, quote unquote, unbreakable. The fact that India is still purchasing energy and weapons from Russia. They really need to make a decision about how they're going to align, given given the aggression and the war in Ukraine. So I think that will be Garcetti's biggest challenge.
Right. Speaking of Russia, their fighter jet collides with the U.S. drone over the Black Sea. Russia is now attempting to recover that information. This is the first time our 2 militaries have been in direct conflict in this proxy war. How significant an escalation?
Well, thankfully, it's really escalated, but it's still unclear what Russia's end game is here. They initially said, hey, we didn't shoot it down. And then, of course, the video footage emerges. And then they said, well, you were in an area where we were running drills. But this was, international waters. It has not brought Putin and Biden together, or even the top officials. So it appears that hopefully this is a bit of a blip, but it's concerning, right, that Russia is engaging in such aggressive actions.
Mm-hmm. So let's go to politics now. Governor Ron DeSantis receiving major backlash, even from some members of his own party, after saying that Ukrainian support is not vital and it's just a territorial dispute. Top Republicans have turned against him, including Mitch McConnell. What are we seeing here within this party?
I think we're seeing what we've been seeing for about the last 5 years, which is this split between the MAGA Republicans and the more classic Republicans in the party. Ron DeSantis is actually putting forth the MAGA position very well. We've discussed this, that the right-wing media ecosystem is really promoting making Ukraine a partisan issue instead of a global security issue. And so, for example, in a recent CNN poll, you see that 80% of Republicans want a presidential candidate on the top of their ticket who is less involved in Ukraine. And it's troubling in the sense that this shouldn't be a partisan issue, right? This really is a global security issue.
All right, before we get to the legal quagmire facing former President Trump, I have to ask you about all these bank failures: Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, now very vulnerable, Credit Suisse. And all seem to be getting bailed out. But there's a lot of finger pointing going on. Democrats blame deregulation of Dodd-Frank. Republicans say the bank was distracted by inclusion and diversity. How dangerous economically, and who is to blame?
Well, let's just say that inclusion and diversity is actually, whether it's gender or race, has actually been shown to boost bottom lines. That's not what's happening here. But the Credit Suisse and the local banks, little apples and oranges, although driven by the same thing, which is investors being concerned about whether or not they'll be able to withdraw funds. As you know, the Biden administration immediately responded with the regional banks and the FDIC bailed out 100%, not just above the $250,000 that is actually insured assured. It does appear that we have stabilized at this point in time, but a couple of things drove this. One are the inflation rates from the Fed. That played a role. Another is absolutely the deregulation. It was essentially bipartisan, but overseen and really pushed by the Trump administration. Elizabeth Warren coming out and really condemning it, but she condemned it a few years ago when they relaxed the regulation. So hopefully we will actually see our political leaders respond and reestablish these regulations.
We will be watching this closely, obviously. Okay. Now to the former president. Reports of another bombshell recording in the Georgia investigation, with members of the grand jury saying it's going to be massive once it's made public, and possibly even worse than that Raffensperger call where Trump asked him to find 11,779 votes. How potentially damaging?
Giselle, how do you get worse? How could it be worse than that call with Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, where Trump very clearly was calling for him to find votes that simply weren't there and overturn the election? But what we've discovered is that members of the grand jury have told members of the press that they heard another call where Trump put pressure on the House Speaker, David Ralston. Now, Ralston has passed away. Recall that he did not call a special session, which was what Trump was trying to get him to do. So this is really damning. There's another phone call. But what I'd really like to see in this case is folks who served on the grand jury no longer leaking and talking to the press. This really does, I think, threaten the legitimacy of this. We're waiting for DA Willis to issue indictments if that's going to happen, but they need to just let this case unfold and stop leaking to the press.
Right. All right. Before I let you go, a Texas judge may ban an FDA-approved abortion medication nationwide, even in states where choice is legal. And if this passes, what does this mean for women's rights, Caroline, and how will it impact women here in California?
It's a major rollback if this Trump-appointed judge, who previously has, had very anti-abortion stances, if he decides to pull abortion drugs from the shelves, it will affect 50% of abortions, because abortion pills are used in 50% of abortions currently. So even in states where abortion is still legal, it would have a profound effect on who has access to abortion.
All right. Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Thank you for just laying it all out for us. We need your perspective. We appreciate you.